When you're talking about what's going on with farmland in California, you are talking about something that is critical to the overall ag health of the United States, right? I mean, let's be honest. California ag rivals most countries. And so that is what Scott Bozzo is watching. Hi, I'm Dave Price. Scott is the president and he's the founder of Macotera Ag Group in California's Central Valley. And during our conversation this week, we're going to drop the F word a few times. Now, not that F word. In our case, the F word is fallow. And fallow is following the implementation of the state's Sustainable Agriculture Management Act, aka SGMA. Scott, welcome back. Good to see you. How are you?
I'm doing good, sir. Good to see you.
You were just fresh back from a vacation trying to catch up in your life, and I'm about to go out on one. So it's fun to catch up before we start recording on the most important parts of our lives. So thanks for making time to get us back into things.
Yeah, no, happy to do it. It's had fun doing it last time and appreciate the invite. So we got some complex issues I think we're going to hit today, and I'm happy to do my part and try to lead a conversation in the right way. But you never know with California water. It's a very complex topic
Amen.
to hit on.
And I'm thinking, you know what I really want is a guy who dreams night after night about the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act.
Ooh,
I mean, because who doesn't?
yeah, yeah. Well, it's just one part of this very complex system that we have out here in California, and not a lot of people probably across the country realize it, but it is having a major impact on California agriculture. And as you know, California agriculture is a huge producer and of fresh fruits, vegetables, nut crops, wine grapes, you name it, we do it. And if it comes across your table at home, it is going to get impacted by Sigma in some way if it was grown in California. So it's an important topic for sure.
And it's like its own country, really. I mean, when you start looking at the output, it truly is.
Yeah, yeah. And, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but if you just look at certain counties, our counties would rank in the top, states of ag
Yeah,
production in the
yeah.
US, right? I think it's either Iowa or Illinois, they hold their own pretty well. But, if you just look at like Fresno County, Tulare County, Kern County, I mean,
Hmm.
they're monstrosities in terms of just total ag production. So yeah, it is, you know, a good way of thinking about it. It's almost like it's its own country out here for sure.
All right, so confession, I had to look this up prepping for my conversation with you because I was trying to remember how many years this went back. So this went through in 2014, and I am talking to you in 2026, which
Yep.
seems astounding.
Yeah. And, to back up a little bit further, California, unlike other states, didn't have any regulation of groundwater. So you could pump groundwater, and there was no regulation for it, right? And that was the way it always was. The surface water rights, so the rights that come out of the incredible infrastructure system that I guess you'd call forefathers of California built. That's a completely different set of water rights and what those do. And
Hmm.
those were a first in kind, first in time, first in right type system. Basically, if you laid claim to it first, you were first in line and you got the claim to that surface water. Well, groundwater, you could pump it and there wasn't any restrictions. California came off historically one of the worst, if not the worst droughts, started in 2020, 2011, 12, and got really bad in that 13, 14 range. And that was the big catalyst for this Groundwater Sustainability Act that got passed and put it into the works. So it finally got, what's the old political saying? You never let a any sort of crisis go
Go to
uncapitalized on for
waste.
new
Yep.
law or regulation. And so, yeah, here we are. And It's been a long 12 years. It seems like in some ways it's gone by very quickly, and in some ways it seems like it's taken a lot of different turns and unknowns. But here we are, and it's sinking its teeth in, and the ag world, even municipalities are having to deal with it. I mean, it's definitely the implementation process is just getting started, and people are trying to navigate that the best we can.
Okay, I know there are a lot of complexities to this. The concept of doing something initially, did that make sense to you when, since there wasn't these structural rules for groundwater? Like, did the decision to do something, did that at the time make sense to you?
Absolutely. I mean, everyone, if you don't believe that California has a groundwater problem, you probably, I mean, there's certain segments
Don't
of the
live
state,
there?
yes, that probably don't have an issue. Yeah, well, yeah, or yeah, but overall, there were portions of this state that were developed into agriculture that likely should have never been. And it's not just agriculture. Obviously, they're the biggest factor in this, but I mean, even housing, right, where you have areas where you have urban sprawl and other things
Hmm.
going on, and areas that maybe we shouldn't have been building homes. There's been tragic things with wildfires and other things that have happened in the state, and so people with right intentions, good minds, capitalism at its best, whatever you want to call it, have gone in and tried to capitalize on opportunities. And when there was no regulation of that groundwater asset, people were able to develop and break out farmland and do what they wanted to do with no oversight. And so it is a problem as a whole and definitely needed to be addressed. We can all argue about how to solve the problem. And I don't think anyone is smart enough to have the perfect answer because it's going to be met with some sacrifice, right? So
Sure.
it's one of those things that when you make all of those kind of withdrawals, I think about it in terms of like not just to like an aquifer because that's what has been happening. You think about it in terms of a bank account, right? If you keep continually making withdrawals or you take out debt, like you get used to living a certain lifestyle, and the
Hmm.
pain to go back is real and something that needs to be felt, and that's what we're trying to navigate right now.
I remember about, man, a long time ago, probably 20 years ago, something like that, here in Iowa, I was interviewing a guy who was running for the state legislature. And and I can't remember what his background was at the time, but he pointed to California and said, there's too much there. There are too many people, too much traffic, too much congestion, and over time, it'll just be too much for the infrastructure, for the system, for everything. Now, he was making the pitch that what a middle of the road state like Iowa should do population wise is try to steal a bunch of those people, like Texas is trying to do right now
Yeah,
with tax
yeah.
rates. But his point was that there's just too much. It's overbuilt, it's oversaturated, and there's just no way it's all going to be able to hold and sustain all of this.
Yeah, yeah, and there's a lot of truth to that. It's a very, I would say, oversimplistic view, but it
Sure.
is true. I mean, you look at our infrastructure in general that I was alluding to earlier with our with the dams, with canal systems, even bridges, other things like in terms of developing surface water that helps, replenish our aquifers and helps with farming and water reliability. I think the last one was built in the 70s. The last
Mm.
major, dam infrastructure project was built in California that long ago. And you look at what the population has done since then, it's just crazy, right? And you look at the expansion of farmland that's happened since then, it's even more confounding, right? And so yeah, it is difficult to navigate that, and right now we're trying to find that level of sustainability in a climate and in a region that is one of the only regions in all of the U.S. and all the world in some cases where you can grow some of these crops, right? And so, it's difficult to make those tough decisions and try to, you don't want to fall into the realm of, I don't want to get into politics here, but like, communism or socialism, where like, oh, you can only grow this or you can
Yeah.
only do that. It's a balance between a free enterprise system for sure.
Okay, so let's look at some of these complexities since they've started pushing this through. The forced fallowing to me, I think that dovetails into right what you're talking about. So the big picture, this gets into, you don't want the government telling you what you can grow, but the converse of that is that people don't want the government telling them they can't grow, right?
Right, right, right. And the whole part of Sigma, the way it was broken out is it created what was called groundwater sustainability agencies. These agencies were broken out geographically over the entire state, right? And those agencies are responsible for achieving sustainability at a local level. So the state, in fact, did not want to have the hammer that they want that they hold it in their hand, but they don't
Hmm.
want to drop it on folks. And so it was like, okay, at the local level, you farmers, you municipalities, you people know the aquifers the best, and you guys should be the ones that can solve the problems the easiest, right? And so part of the reason that these GSAs were formed at a local level was try to keep the power and the control as localized as possible. There's two ways there's two levers you can pull. You can increase supply, meaning you bring in more surface water, or you reduce demand, meaning you cut surface or you cut pumping, right? And so you look at both of those levers, and these groundwater sustainability agencies are trying to blend the two to get to a way that makes the groundwater sustainable. There's six things that the law is trying to avoid. They all kind of mix in, but I think it's good context for stuff
Hmm.
for all of us. The un the results they're trying to avoid, or the kind of six things that they're looking at, are groundwater levels, groundwater storage, saltwater intrusion, water quality, subsidence, and then the interconnection of surface water. And so you're trying to protect all of those six things in your region, and each region of California has different things that they're fighting, right? And so when these GSAs are creating these plans, they could say, okay, well, we're going to need to fallow water or fallow farmland because we can't come up with a solution otherwise to
Hmm.
stop something. Maybe it's subsidence, maybe it's saltwater intrusion. Who knows what they're trying to
Depending on the
stop.
region, right?
Exactly,
Hmm.
exactly. And so different regions have different things that they're trying to avoid. And so um, you can look at fallowing as a way to stop some of that. Some of the studies have come out, and who knows what the exact number will be, but they're talking about um, Sigma alone could take out 500 to a million acres of farmland out
Hmm.
of production in the state. I think I looked up this morning. There's roughly 8.2 million acres, irrigated acres in California. So it's not a small
Yeah.
impact. That's a large percentage when you're talking about maybe 500 to a million of the 8.5 million or whatever it is. So um, the hard part when you get back to your original question on fallowing is how do you do it in a way that creates some sort of synergies across the board? Because what the state is concerned about and what local people are concerned about is you might have this checkerboard effect where farmer A up here is farming his whatever almonds, and then this guy up here, he's like, oh, I'm done. I don't have any more
Hmm.
water left in my water budget, and so I'm going to pull out and be
Hmm.
done. And so it's not so much that the GSA is forcing or telling that farmer to fallow. It's not like they're sending the sheriff out there or something like that.
Yeah.
But everyone has a water budget, right? And so you have to look at your water budget and figure out what you can farm sustainably and what you can't. And so there's some cases where you don't have any surface water, and you might have almonds that need, say, 3.5 to 4 acre feet. And the sustainable yield that these GSAs have come up with in areas that we call the white areas that don't have any surface water, it could be like 0.2 or 0.25 acre feet. Well, where are you going to go get
Yeah,
the
that math
other?
doesn't work.
Don't work, right? And so you could have a couple thousand acres, and in some cases now you're down to a couple hundred.
Hmm.
And so that's where the fallowing comes in. That's where the discussion comes in of, well, what do we do with the rest of it? And there's different programs. We can get into that a little bit if you want. There's different things that people have tried, but none of those solutions are easy to implement. And like I said, that checkerboard effect is very noticeable as you drive throughout the state for sure.
Uh, that is forcing people to make incredible lifestyle choices, business decisions. How, I guess when I'm hearing you talk, I'm wondering how that changes though, because the water supply is not likely to change anytime soon, right? So is it just going to force some of these folks to, maybe they were doing almonds, maybe they transition into something else, or do you feel like what it's going to end up doing is taking some of these acres out of ag production totally?
I think it's going to be a mix of all of that and even more, right? So you have um, a bunch of different solutions, if you want to call them solutions, to where, um, for instance, we have a farm that we planted about half of the acres to citrus, and we purposely left the other half open, and it's not planted right now to anything.
Okay.
And people refer to that as your stigma buffer, if you will. And
Yeah.
so you're just leaving that land open. Well, now what do we do with that? Well,
Hmm.
we installed a district water turnout to where we can get supplemental district water, and when it's available, we're just going to use that acreage as a recharge pond. So in some cases, the water districts that are being forward thinking and aggressive with this, they're doing that exact same thing on a district level. Not exactly, we did it on our own farm ourselves, but you take acreage out of production, and you're hopefully trying to do your part by creating recharge projects that help. You flood that land with maybe a foot, 6 inches of water. You let it percolate, you let it sink down, and it for the greater good. We've also looked at in a very I don't know if you want to call it trendy, but another thing to do is California's pretty sunny and pretty hot, and so solar is a
Hmm.
big thing now. And so
Hmm.
there's massive solar projects that water districts are doing. Solar options are coming back now. This current administration has I wouldn't say put the brakes on it completely, but
Yeah.
there's political issues there too. Um, but when you think about that, it's like, okay, well, that seems like a viable
Hmm.
option that maybe, you have AI, you have all these higher demands for energy. If it makes sense to stop farming this, why don't we convert some of this to solar? Where it's a win for the farmer, he gets a nice lease payment from the solar company. It's a win for water demand because you have less water. Obviously, the solar panels aren't taking up any water.
Hmm.
And it's a win for the grid, if you will. It's a win for producing energy. So there's solutions like that. There's other habitat. I don't know what you call it. Restoration, I guess, is probably the right word. Um, that might be less water intensive, and for different endangered species. Once again, I get back to that checkerboard though, right? If you have habitat over here, and then you have a solar project here, and then almonds over here, and then the next habitat's down below that. Well, how do you get the animal or whatever it is you're trying
Hmm.
to provide habitat for to connect it and all that stuff? So it's not necessarily easy. Lower demand, water demand crops, or certainly you could do some dry land farming, and other options too. I've seen things like agave go in where, yeah, I mean, who knows? Maybe we'll be the tequila capital of the world at some point. I don't know, but where there's a will, there's a way, and so the hardest part is just sitting around doing nothing. Um, but you hope that there's some solutions that in the deck of cards that will help farmers kind of bridge the gap. And in some cases, they're you run out of luck, and that farmer's
Sure.
had to sell or move on or go bankrupt in some cases or whatever. Those are the sad things to see. And unfortunately, when there aren't any good options out there, that's the reality of the situation.
I was thinking when you were talking about solar here, a video I saw recently from another country where they are using, and also a sunny, warm place. They are using these solar panels for more narrow waterways, but to sort of cover them up at the top, so you're producing the energy, but it gives you a shade in these warmer climates to protect and
Hmm.
minimize some of the evaporation. Have you seen any of that kind of development in California yet? I don't know how cost sustainable it is.
Yeah, there actually is a pilot project going on right now. I think it's Turlock Irrigation District. I'll try to find one of the articles and send it to you. But they just started that. They
Hmm.
built a large. It almost looks like a pole barn, but that's not what it is. And it goes right over the top of the
Hmm.
canal. And the idea is that you get the solar on top, creating energy and shade down below that's reducing the evaporating water. I think that project is probably in year one, two, three. I mean, it's pretty new, and
Okay.
so my guess is they would really need to look at the viability of that and if it's going to work or not. I don't know. It seemed like a good solution to me at the time when I thought like, yeah, that's a great idea. Like,
Sure.
why not try it?
Yeah.
It gets down to reliability and how much water is it actually saving. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I think we'll get into this a little bit, but another concern I think folks have is just, especially out here in the Central Valley where I'm at, is the subsidence issue. And as you
Mm.
have subsidence, how that negatively impacts infrastructure. You can't go full send on this solar canal project because what happens if the canal starts sinking or the solar panels buckle or break or
Yeah.
so that's something to take into consideration too. But it's not meaningful enough yet. The pilot project, as far as I'm aware, it's not a proven or unproven concept yet. They're still working through it, and if it's something that's viable, then I think it's definitely something people should be considering.
How widespread, how big of a deal is subsidence there?
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, subsidence, what happens is you pump the groundwater out of the ground. The water molecules sit within the various tiny grain in between the grains of sand, dirt, clay, whatever you have. And as you pump that out, you create air, and that, of course, gravity to the land falls on itself. And
Yeah.
so it falls a little bit, a little bit, a little bit. And you can Google, there's pictures if you Google California subsidence of, I mean, telephone poles. I mean, huge things where they mark it. Okay, 1976, and you
Yeah.
can see how far the land has really fallen. So it's a big deal for sure in California right now. That's one of the things that the state is highly focused on. And some of these GSAs in the more critical subsidence zones, they've literally taken about sections of ground, so about 640 acres, and they have it checkerboarded in a way to where each one of those zones has its own subsidence reading to where they can measure what's there. And if you have a certain exceedance level where your land is falling, stop all pumping and you can't do anything anymore. And you
Mm.
could have not been pumping, say, for the last 5 years. But maybe it's your neighbor or someone else pumping down the street or whatever that's causing the problem. It doesn't matter. You can't bring in any groundwater credits from another part of the GSA or whatever to try to solve that problem. And so it's one of those things that it is at the top of the mind of everyone for sure. And call it from uh, Stockton south to Bakersfield. The more fine-tuned would probably be like Merced down to Bakersfield. The Bryant Kern Canal, which is one of the major canals that distributes water on the whole east side of the valley from Fresno down to Bakersfield. The state and the Bryant contractors and some federal funding have helped to raise. There was a pinch point in that canal to where if you think of a hose, right? If it's flowing downhill, if you put a little bit of a kink in it, it's all gravity fed. So if you have a little bit of a kink in it, it's gonna stop the capacity, and
Hmm.
they weren't able to move as much water through that pinch point. Well, that was due to subsidence, and so they spent hundreds of millions of dollars going around that pinch point. And now there's two canals right next to each other. One was built, in a way to help that conveyance problem. And so the state is looking at that very, very like through a microscope with almost any farm. And subsidence is something that people are concerned about. There's certain hot spots in the state um, that are in the bullseye, so to speak. And if you got the bullseye in your back, you need to be careful of what the pumping restrictions could look like. And it affects all the infrastructure, roads, bridges, canals. We've spent billions of dollars on the high-speed rail that
Hmm.
isn't operational yet, but there could be subsidence that impacts that. I mean, all of these things come into play, and it's not
Sure.
cheap. And subsidence is something that continues to happen even with reduced, so there's a tail to it, to where even if you stop the pumping, it's still going to happen for a while. So um, we've been blessed the last, I think, 3 years have been average or above average rainfall, and that hasn't happened in a long time in our state. And so those things have been very good, but typically you see a lot more subsidence happening, obviously, if you have a drought, so you have less surface water available, so people rely on more groundwater. It's usually like a 60-40 split. Usually it's like, in a drought, you might have 40% groundwater and or 40% surface water and 60% groundwater. If you have a normal rainfall year and normal surface water, that might flip to where you get more surface water. And there's some portions of the state that are very blessed. We have a farm that we haven't turned on we have two wells and we haven't turned them on once, just because
Hmm.
we have abundant surface water that's flowing. And that's what we irrigate those almonds with, and they're fantastic. So it's not all bad. There's certain regions that do fantastic with surface water, but it just kind of depends where you're at.
I'm in Iowa. We have a lot of rural folks who depend on well water, and I'm curious how those folks in California are impacted as Sigma starts pushing through here.
Yeah, and it's another big problem with over pumping is you have these domestic aquifers, or domestic wells, I should say, that a lot of times they're not as big, they're not as deep of a well.
Hmm.
They don't have the high demand, and in some cases, especially out here in the Central Valley, um, it's not the affluent. It's minority, very not so well off
Hmm.
communities or home sites that these people aren't wealthy at all. They're your farm workers. They're the backbone of the labor pool of the ag economy out here. And so those wells have gone dry now. So that's something that the GSAs are addressing. And they're doing that with certain things, like certain GSAs have had a tax to where you have a certain like dollar per acre amount that you have to pay. And then that goes into a pool. And if you're a domestic well owner and your well goes out, you can apply for funding and say, hey, my well went out, and the GSA will pay to redo your well for you,
Okay.
and help out with that. So there are solutions that these GSAs are willing to do to help, whether it's funding like that. There's other things that, I mean, I've seen it to where if the water quality isn't good, they've set up the ability for land or for residential owners to come in and get just get bottled water delivered to their house and
Mm.
whatnot. So they're trying. It's definitely it can be politicized, which I understand why that happens. But I think that those communities that rely on those groundwater wells for their livelihood, for their drinking water, it's definitely something that needs to be protected. And I think that these GSAs are doing what they can now to try to mitigate some of that.
What's the what is who's playing sheriff on this? You mentioned how they've tried to build in so that you have some local oversight since these local folks know this the best. But I mean, do you have who's out there monitoring to make sure that everybody's playing by the rules? Has it reached that point yet? Like, and how strict is it?
So those are great questions, and some of it is playing out right now, like literally playing out in this implementation process that's been
Mm-hmm.
happening over the last couple of years. Because the first, call it 5 to 10 years of Sigma was all about we need to form these GSAs, we need to figure out the plan, we need to, and so now that the plans are basically approved with the state, well, now you have the implementation process. And so now as you have um, bad actors, if you will, that aren't complying, what do we do with that? So
Mm-hmm.
there's been a few things like if you have a groundwater allocation and you over pump, a lot of times how they measure that now is through satellite through ET. You can also challenge that. You can put your own meter on there on your own pump, and you can send that to the GSA. But some of these GSAs that are more advanced, they literally have a dashboard. It's like a bank account, and it tells you, okay, we track this much pumping, and this is how much you have left, and whatnot. Um, as far as the policing goes, I have yet to see a headline of a sheriff going and putting a lock on anyone's pump. I
Yeah.
would not want to be the person that has to do that.
Seriously.
Um, but I've seen liens get put on properties
Mm.
for tax purposes that are not paying their overdraft fees. So if you ever were going to, sell your property or whatever, there's been that constraint put on it. Um, so there are mechanisms in place. The state is the biggest hammer. If you get into the probation, call it the penalty box with the state, you definitely don't want to be there, and they can impose some pretty hefty fees and do things. I don't think the state wants to have to do those, but they're holding that hammer, and if they need to use it, they likely will. But right now the threat has been enough, and um, I think farmers, for the most part, realize that there's a problem and trying to navigate those solutions the best you can. There's some that are just kicking the can down the road and they're saying, hey, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing and don't
Mm-hmm.
really care. And then I would say the other portion that is yet to be, not yet to be, there's been multiple legal battles with this too. And so there's, Kings County, I think had some lawsuits going on to where there were extraction fees and other things. And so there's some fight back with, okay, how much teeth do you really have? And when you think back in 2014 when this law was implemented, you had almonds at $4 a pound. You had
Yeah.
no regulate, and so people were planting like crazy. You had expansion of permanent crops and in the state at that point because no one really knew. Does this, people would say, oh, they're never going to implement that, or
Sure.
oh, it's not going to be a big problem. Well, when you're making a planting like almonds and you're going to be in the ground for 20 plus years,
Yeah.
you need to think through that. And some people just didn't think it was going to be that big a deal. Or maybe they thought, okay, well, it's going to come in and I'm going to get 20 years out of this. And then when it's done, I'll let it go back to the rabbits. I'll be done with it after that, like I'll
Mm-hmm.
rip out the almonds and it'll be done. So there are things that farmers have done in that regard. But yeah, there hasn't been a Sigma police task force created yet, and Lord willing, that won't happen. There'll be enough community buy-in that people will do the right thing.
When we were emailing back and forth before we talked, you were talking about what feels like there's no perfect scenario here to find the perfect balance to protect agriculture, to protect the water supply, to protect the environment, all of this kind of stuff. But is Sigma pliable enough to where it can be adjusted? So as they start implementing all of this and they realize, okay, this didn't quite work out maybe in this area, because as you pointed out, it's so geographically different throughout the
Hmm.
state that you're going to have different challenges and different needs. So is it pliable enough that they can adjust the implementation, the enforcement, whatever it is, or is it hard and fast and it would take an act of the legislature to go back and amend the law and all that?
So I think, yeah, when you look back to those 6 things we talked about, there's some pliability in all of those, and there is some ability for the GSAs at the local level to adjust plans accordingly. I believe every plan has like a 5-year look-in. if you will. The whole
Okay.
goal was to achieve sustainability by 2040. And I should have said that to begin with. But the whole goal was to get to sustainability over this time. And they've done that with various ways. Like there's like ramp down schedules to where, okay, they call it transitional pumping, where you could pump up to your 3 acre feet, and then the next year it'd be like whatever, 2.5, and then two, you can go all the way down.
Hmm.
So they've had that flexibility built in. The hard part is you have a different water year every year, you have different climate conditions every year, and you have all these different studies and things that are happening to where it seems like a lot of times all we're doing is just studying the problem and oh well, we learned something different. Maybe we need, but it's kind of like a cruise ship. You can't just, it's not a CD. You can't just spin that thing around
Yeah.
and change directions very quickly. You kind of have to have a long-term approach on it. So I think there's some flexibility in it. I don't think that I think that's what it was intended once again to be back at the local level, not at the state level. Because if you have politicians arguing about it, they don't know what's happening at the local level. These
Sure.
GSAs are a lot of times they're run by water districts, or they're run by a group of farmers that are just trying to do the best they can. Um, and that's likely the best option to try to fix it, solve it. And so if they need to amend them or change them, they're meeting on a monthly basis, and so that would likely be the case of how you get it done. Um, Now that doesn't say that the state doesn't have programs or things to help out with. They had a program that was called it was called Land Flex, and this program was if you had fallowed ground, you could enroll that fallowed ground in this program, and the state would pay you to not farm it
Mm.
effectively. So they had, they were all the headlines, and it was so great, right? Well, they allocated, I think it was $25 million for this program, and they got like 5,000, less than 5,000 acres enrolled because they went through the money like that. I mean, it was
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah.
And you look at 5,000 acres compared to the low end of the range for Sigma, like I talked about earlier,
Yeah.
of
Half a mil.
500
Yeah.
to a million. If you take the
Yeah.
low end, you take 500, like less than 1% ain't gonna cut it, guys. Like it's a rounding error, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? It was a good intention program and whatnot, but it's one of those things that hopefully there's going to be more help from the state to help out with those
Mhm.
with those, and maybe that helps get folks to that makes the program hopefully more pliable for folks. Getting back to your earlier question,
Yeah.
because I think it's going to take a lot of different arrows in the quiver, so to speak, to get it solved.
I feel like we could talk about Sigma. It's so complex. There's so many levels. We could probably do this for like a month straight of series to dig into this. So I
Yeah.
appreciate the way, though, that you're digging into several of these. I know we just scratched the surface. So thanks for taking us through this. And it just sounds to me like I got to talk you into doing this again sometime to hit some of the other facets of this because there's so much to follow on this and it impacts so many people.
Yeah, it is. And once again, Sigma is just one part of the California water dynamic. And so it is incredibly complex, frustrating to deal with, but we also feel very blessed to have the infrastructure and things we have. But we don't get the rain that you guys get. And so so we got to do what we got. And it's more so about trying to divide up that pie because it's near impossible to grow it. But yeah, you and I could talk about California water for years. Maybe need to do it at a bar too. It's not it's
Seriously.
not it's not an easy topic, and I'm grateful that there's folks working on it every day, and we just try to adjust out here in the agriculture world the best we can and do our part. So it's not an easy topic, but it's one that's at the forefront of our minds for sure.
For sure. For sure. Thanks, Scott. Really appreciate you. Thanks for the time.
Yeah, likewise, anytime. Appreciate it.
Such a tough balance that Sigma is trying to figure out in the state of California. We hope you will check out the American Farmland Owner newsletter. It's the place where landowners get their news with the latest farmland trends, unique farm sales, insights from top leaders in ag, finance, and policy, policy like Sigma. You can check it out right now at AmericanFarmlandOwner.com. Thanks for joining us for the conversation here on the podcast this week, and thanks for caring about the future of our farmland.